Hello everybody, welcome to episode 3 on the mandated short films from Eduqas to inspire your short film productions. I absolutely love this one. This is Benjamin Cleary's UK film Stutterer from 2015 with a runtime of 13 minutes and centres a man whose lush inner thoughts are rendered mute by a crippling speech impediment, a stutter, and he feels isolated from the world despite having a flourishing online relationship. It makes use of voiceover, which is something that I have warned you against, but it makes use of it here in a really moving way for his really articulate, intelligent expression being hindered and crippled by his speech impediment. It's a brilliant piece of filmmaking that deserved the award it's won. I am finding that Stutterer is one of the ones that comes and goes. I've previously had to purchase it via YouTube, but at the moment it's available via this link, which I'll also put in the description below. You might otherwise struggle a bit more with getting hold of this one. I don't know whether it's because it's one that was commercially released only a shorter period of time ago. As ever, what inspirations could you use in your film, whether they be narrative or technical and aesthetic? Or what ideas won't you use and why? That could be a brief way of bringing in a mandated film to your evaluation without having to spend too long if you've got too many to get through. Narrative, how does it establish protagonists? How are other characters established? How is setting established? Are there enigmas conveyed? Binary oppositions are really key, as you know, is my feeling. Any crises conveyed and how are they resolved, if they are, as well as the typical things that we'd be looking at in terms of cinematography, editing, mise-en-scène, sound. All in all, how does this build inspiration for your film, be it a distinct genre, a narrator, non-linear narrative, or use of parallel storylines? We begin with this quite unusual use of an extreme close-up on Greenwood's mouth. If we just describe that in and of itself, it might have some sort of intimate or sexual chemistry meaning and response to it. But here, it's the core of the speech impediment that prevents him from making himself clear to the person on the other end of the phone fast enough. We then quite abruptly shift to a close-up. I would call that a close-up. His head is filling frame, that shows his frustration that the dial tone is now ringing because the person on the other end of Umbrella Broadband has hung up on him, and he's able to very eloquently put together and express his issue in voiceover in his head in a way that he's not been able to do in speech. Our credit sequence gives us the block of flats that he lives in and establishes this very warm colour palette that is utilised throughout the film and carries on into the next shot where you have this very cinematic, quite common colour grading of an amber or orange colour on the opposite side of the colour wheel to the blues and teals of the shadows, whilst he learns sign language. And the next shot establishes that it's sign language that he's learning as a means of communication because his speech impediment is so severe, perhaps. As we cut further on, we've got that opposition on the colour wheel again as he very much stares down this opposition with being on the phone to the broadband company and not being able to make himself understood fast enough. Now, There is a twist at the end of the film that I don't want to spoil at this point, but I wonder whether he is actually preparing sign language for something in particular, or whether he's actually, as he comes later to pretend to be deaf to avoid having to try to make himself clear, whether he thinks that the incredible hard work of learning sign language is actually an alternative to having to speak. We then find out that he is in correspondence and a kind of online relationship with Ellie, somebody that he's speaking to online, and that they're really intelligent. They've got a way with words. They are very eloquent in their vocabulary, and talking about use of language is another thing that thematically resonates on a different level within the meaning and response and representation of this film. Thereafter, we have an establishing shot of his workplace, something that the mise-en-scène of which seems to suggest is very isolated, like him, given his inability to articulate himself, despite a charming intelligence that is gaining him a successful relationship online. He's actually a typographer, so he works in the realm of written communication, much like that's benefiting him online with Ellie. What's wrong with the rules? Conveying this concept still more so. He's also very funny. We see him here making what he calls snap judgment number however many thousand, 1244 or what have you, whereby he makes these satirical observations. We cut to him making a satirical observation. He makes up backstories for people, something that I do when I'm on holiday, if I'm honest, because it's just fun in my head. Here, a Year 11 student, flaky but dependable, ecstatic currently having received first blowjob the night before, or what have you. He makes funny, tongue-in-cheek, really eloquent, satirical observations that would be hilarious in the timing of just rolling off the tongue, but he hasn't that verbal articulation. It's conveyed through voiceover and the expression that he's got as he blows out his cigarette smoke. He's having a little smirk at the idea. Probably not the kind of thing when he's observing this idea of, a Year 11 boy's first sexual experiences, that he is all that successful in himself given his lack of articulate ability. We then cut to him, actually, we find out in the following sequence, going to visit his father, but he's actually in his head rehearsing just one sentence of something that he wants to say to Dad in a quite rhythmic, musical way, trying to practice the rhythm of getting it out before his stammer and speech impediment spoils that for him, in what in this sequence becomes quite an awkwardly long static take to convey for us as spectator the patience with which the father has to wait. This is something that in this film moves me to tears, really, because my brother has a stammer of this sort, and it's very important, I feel, to wait for that articulation rather than finishing sentences for him. In the following scene, we get correspondence that Ellie is going to be visiting London, and does he want to meet in real life, face to face? And we realise that he has not admitted or made clear to her that he has this profound speech impediment. He actually goes on to morosely shut his laptop, almost. This is his means of communication, and he's closing it off. He's giving up. He's resigned to failure. Actually, unfortunately, my screenshot hasn't quite caught it here, but he doesn't quite magnetically snap the MacBook shut. He just leaves it open enough to the possibility of doing something. In a similar way, he chickens out and gives up when somebody approaches him for directions to a nearby cafe. He pretends through sign language to be deaf and unable to respond. In actuality, he's fully understanding, and he quickly and articulately gives his directions in the voiceover. We then have a sequence at a bus stop where somebody is being abusive to his girlfriend, and he tries to intervene, but he's not quick enough to actually say, "Oi, stop this," before he gets punched in the nose for it. And beyond, he realises he's got to communicate with Ellie, and a bit of Foley sound establishes his frustrated wait for a response. The notification sound has his ears or his eyes dart open, which perhaps is something of an ironic contrast with the prior sequences and their thematic resonance that he's been pretending to be deaf. We then get quite a comic series of jump cuts between being shirtless and bare-chested to one shirt, then a different shirt, then another shirt, then a different tie. And those jump cuts convey that passage of time and his nervousness. Along with the jump cuts, there's also asynchronous sound where we get the start of his voiceover overlapping with other bits and pieces of voiceover that continues into him making satirical jokes about how, he just had a quick bash on the nose, or he had some plastic surgery, or he does not look like a serial killer, I look like a serial killer. And then he starts nervously binning his flowers that he's purchased and taking off the tie and opting for a different gift. Ultimately, he watches her from across the road, and we get the revelation that she, in fact, is deaf. She has been withholding something from him too, and the sign language he's been learning is going to allow them to have this perfect communication. They've both been withholding something that they're deeply nervous about. The teal and warm oranges of the colour scheme come through again, and I just find this end denouement sequence really, really moving. I'll forewarn again with my caveat that voiceover can be really lazy script writing unless it's done very well for a particular effect. Here, it's not so much for comic effect as in The Gunfighter, which we'll look at in a future episode, but for the moving emotional effect. We'll see some good examples of it, but it is a case of telling where your script writing should be showing rather than telling, unless you do it for very good specific reason. Here, of course, it's incredibly moving, but be very, very careful about something that can be quickly mundane unless the person that you're getting to be your actor delivers it in a really compelling way for a particular purpose. How is our protagonist established? We've got this extreme close-up on the lips and then voiceover. He seems to be learning sign language. The call centre doesn't realise the required patience that his father later uses. He works as a typographer in a print works. It's his way to communicate that has a thematic resonance. The creative use of voiceover as internal monologue that's almost stream of consciousness because he's unable to outwardly express himself verbally. His satirical observations, humour of snap judgment number such and such of the flaky year 11 and their sexual experience, are later repeated in a much less humorous way when he makes the realization that the woman on the tube, not women, woman on the tube could easily be Ellie, who he's corresponding with, although he's seen her picture. And then he makes a much more self-deprecating, self-referential judgment number, blah-de-blah, of himself, saying excels in self-pity. These self-referential observations. I think we really feel for how immensely intelligent this bloke is and such barriers that he has to overcome. Other characterization is established through instant messenger on the laptops. They both make explicit references to the tones of voice that they are using, hating text speak, avoiding any of those misinterpretations that text messages can cause, doing it tongue-in-cheek. This is his only form of immediate and intimate communication, and conveys this meaning and response on the need within what it means to be human, to communicate intimately. He might be enigmatic in leaning against the wall with his cigarette. The Printworks is established as a location. Narrative binary oppositions. The telephone call is the immediate crisis point straight away at the very opening of the film. The altercation with the abusive bloke at the bus stop, the need for the speed of speech there in intervening with the abusive boyfriend that's thwarted by him being punched as a result, which the bloke who's doing the shouting at his girlfriend is just going to assume is him being a wimp or stuttering and stammering over not wanting to intervene, being the alpha male in that toxic masculine way. Other binary oppositions, avoiding giving directions by pretending to be deaf. And indeed that he must feel so emasculated by having his father have to ring the broadband company for him. The chief crisis, however, is the problem of the real meeting with Ellie. The way that he extrapolates that onto the commuter, that could be her possibly feeling infantilized by his father having to help, attempting the excuses via the text messaging with Ellie before aborting those excuses, that gesture of closing the laptop becoming an important emblem of giving up, literally closing the means of communication, but not quite, leaving it just slightly open. The way that he practices the rhythm and the elision of speech to try to speak and make an observation to Dad eloquently, avoiding speech by pretending to be deaf. The notification alert Foley sound and his eyes opening, which is pretty ironic given his prior references to pretending to be deaf. I think that's the first time that we're excluded from Ellie's message. It's his eye movement over the top of his laptop screen and his hand gestures to his throat that lead us to infer a positive outcome, despite him being terribly nervous about it. Are we frustrated with him that he hasn't forewarned Ellie? The dumping of the flowers, the cycling through excuses for his nose, not a serial killer, had a little work done. The book was just as cheesy, going back to the flowers. His panic is conveyed through those overlaid speech tracks that are asynchronous. The resolution is open, but I think we've got real hope for their relationship. He observes her and she's deaf. She's been going through a similarly parallel thing. His learning of sign language is actually really fortuitous. We don't get to see him utilise sign language to greet her, and it's an open, unresolved ending, but we know somehow that this relationship is really going to thrive in a way that's terribly moving, at least from my point of view. I, as ever, will leave you to gather your inspirations, but I wondered in terms of inspiring cinematography and editing, whether the notifications sound and the eyes open and the way that we are excluded or included within their textual messages could be something that you could use. You could do one of those edited overlaid speech bubbles, blue and white or green and white for those poor souls on Android, that will let you convey some bits and pieces of this if it's done well in a way that isn't too cliched. Do go back and enjoy it for a second time, and I will see you soon for some forthcoming episodes on other short films. I'm trying to remember what the next one is that I'm going to do with you. Curfew next time. If this is helpful, please hit like and a subscription, and hitting the notification bell will get you the first and foremost knowledge when the next episode comes out. Thank you, and I hope to see you again.